Hey everybody, wonder what those shiny things do in the Umbraco Settings section? Well, this video is for you. Hello everyone again, and we're going to continue our journey with the Umbraco back office tour / orientation / things you should know. And we've arrived at the settings section, which is available by logging into your Umbraco back office and clicking on settings. So once you do so, you will be here where you have familiar things. You have a tree on the left. You've got, looks like, one dashboard over here. And it looks like if we were to just look at the tree here, you would notice that we have doc types, templates, blah, 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 all the way down. So most of the work that you will ever do in the settings page, or section I should say, will be in doc types. And for that reason, we're going to skip that for right now, and we'll come back to it because that'll be the majority of this video. And let's just jump into the other bits here. So if we look here at templates, we have a couple of templates, and those actually line up with some of our doc types. So the generic page template goes with the generic doc type. We have a bar template, and that goes with, who knows, one of those. And the point is here is this is where templates live and hang out. You can right click and you can create a template here. And what that actually will do is create a template in the database as a database entry. And that's very important because as a developer, you'll actually not edit your templates here in the back office. So what I am advising you not to do is to actually come here and do something with the templates. If you're a experienced developer, you'll want to steer clear of this because you'll want all of this to happen probably with IntelliSense and all the cool tooling that you have here. Now, Umbraco has created a few things here to kind of do things out of the box, but I think, to be perfectly honest, this can be a little bit confusing for a experienced developer. So just know that you can come in here and you can do these things here with the templates, but the only thing that you really need to know how to do here is if you need to create your own template and create that database entry. And we only do that so we can do an association later on a doc type. So in general, you actually won't hang out in the template section. Next, we have the partial views, and again, we probably won't hang out here or do anything here. Yes, you can do some editing here, but this is just a file system echo, so to speak, because you'll have a views folder if you're familiar with MVC, and this is your partial folder view right here. So again, you're going to use Visual Studio, not something you're going to hang out in at all. Next we have here is the style sheets, and the style sheets is probably not what you think it is. When you create a style sheet here, and we'll call this one my style sheet, what we're actually doing here is creating a set of rules here, and if we right click on that again and oops, nope, we won't do that. We'll click on there, and you'll notice that what we can do in here is add some rules and styles for the rich text editor. So in general, nope, you won't be in here either. So let's keep moving on here. Scripts, again, yet another thing that you, as an experienced Umbraco developer, you probably won't be hanging out and doing anything in. Finally, we get to something that may be useful to you. If you're doing a localized site, multilingual site, you want to create entries here for the languages. So for instance, if we were going to do Danish, we might select this one here and hit create. That just tells Umbraco, okay, I'm tracking that you're probably going to have both of these languages in your site. And if we were to click on each one of these, you don't really get a whole lot of stuff here. You can change it here. I don't know if you'd ever want to change it once you'd add it. But that actually feeds directly into our next thing here, which is the dictionary. So the dictionary is a one-to-one mapping of dictionary terms, and again, I don't really use this much, mostly because I don't do a whole lot of localized sites, and when I do, I will choose a different method. So, but just to show you for demo purposes, if we have a word and we call it home, we click here, we can now say, well, that word verbatim, if you see that, it's home in English, and it might be something here, and sorry people from Denmark, I don't know what the word for home is, but that's where you would put it if you wanted a one-to-one word translation. Again, I don't really use it that much. Sometimes where this is useful is user interfaces and things like that. Otherwise, there are other tools like Vorto by Matt Brailsford, which I really like for multilingual sites. But we won't dwell there, and I bet you won't spend a whole lot of time here. If you do want some more information about the dictionary terms, there's plenty of information online. Next, we have media types, and if you watch the media section video, you'll notice that these line up with the media type for each one. So we got file, folder, image. In general, again, you're not going to be here. One reason you will want to come here is, let's say we look at the properties of an uploaded image, and we want to add, say, alt text. So usually what we'll do is we'll add alt text there. This is just going to be usually a simple text string. We hit submit, notice that it shows up there, and we hit save. And for demonstration purposes, we can go back now to one of these awesome pictures here, and that's where alt text shows up, and we can say Voltron yes. So that's where you're going to use primarily anything to do with media types here. You can right click, you can create one, but again, file, folder, and image usually cover all your use cases. One interesting thing here that I recently learned is if you go to the permissions here and uncheck this, you'll no longer be able to create a media item here by doing right-click create. However, it doesn't prevent you from just dragging and dropping in here. So there are some steps here we can prevent from really kind of making this unorganized in the media tree, and that's driven by that that media type setting. But again, dragging and dropping kind of ignores that. And then finally, we have content templates. And to review again what a content template is, if you were to right click and create a piece of content, and let's say a generic page, here's your content templates. It's saying select one of these. If we were to flip back here, this is where you would manage those right there. So it's by doc type, and you would basically change the defaults. Now, there's one issue I have with this, because let's say you're in a production environment. Typically, you're going to disallow most content editors from coming to the settings. They're only going to see content. They're only going to see media. You're going to turn the rest of this off. Maybe you'll have forms still turned on there. But this is for their own good, to prevent them from getting in here and breaking things, sometimes irreversibly. So it would be nice to really kind of find a different home for this maybe one day, and that's just my suggestion to the Umbraco HQ. Okay, so we ran through all those pretty quick. In the there's one thing I want to show you on the image here. The image here is of type image cropper, and some other versions of Umbraco, this is the upload. And as far as I know, the image cropper is a hot inline replacement for the upload type. So if you have an old version of Umbraco, I would highly recommend you just come in here and switch it to the image cropper. That way you have all those abilities that you saw in the media section video. Okay. This time we'll really go to doc types, and this is where we're going to make or break your experience with Umbraco, in my humble opinion. Next would be data types, but that's for another day. So when we look here, a document type is fundamental to the way Umbraco works. So we have a foo doc type, we have a generic page doc type, we have a site setting doc type. That's important because if we flip back to the content here, right click, that's going to be mirrored right here. So you can create a foo page, a generic page, a site settings page. What is nice about these is sometimes these are just data, and they have no template. They're never meant to be rendered. They're just meant to store data. Some of these are actually meant to be actually manifest on the outside. So without going too much further, let's create a doc type. And for this one, we're going to get options here. We can create a doc type, and this is going to include a template. We can create just a folder to organize stuff, or we can create that piece of data without a template. So for now, we're going to create a page with a template. I'm going to call this one news landing. This is very common to do. And what you'll see over here next to this lock is your alias. And you'll use this alias quite a bit in code, so just know where to find it. Next, we can click on this icon and dress it up. We can pick from different colors, so I'm going to pick that right there. Oh gosh, news. There's probably a newspaper icon. Sure enough, there is. And so we'll see how that manifests later. Next thing we're going to do is add a tab. And what a tab is, if we go over here, it's like this content or properties. So out of the box, a blank document type is just going to have properties. So a lot of times we're just going to add the token content tab. And we're just going to add, gosh, what should we add here? Just something silly like name. Notice that when you this is the human readable right here, and this is the machine readable. And now we get to pick an editor. Honestly, you're probably almost never going to choose available editors, but it is default. You're almost always going to pick reuse. Now, we haven't talked anything about the developer section. That's fine. You can watch that video at a different time. But the reason is because you're going to configure these typically not here. You don't want to create a new one here, in my opinion. You're going to want to go to the developer section to do so. But let's say you've got some stuff here. Now you just pick it. So we're going to pick a text string. And you can do some basic validation here, whether or not it's mandatory. You can do some other things here, and that's up to you. Not really the scope of today. And if we hit submit, notice here it's got a little preview here. We can go back to the configuration with the cog. We can delete it. Very important to know, if you hit this delete button, this will delete data off your website out of the database forever and ever. There is no oops or can we just roll back? There is none of that. It's see you bye. If we want to add a second tab, we can add a tab over here. And one thing that you don't want to do is create an SEO tab, because what we actually will take advantage of is compositions. But before we get too far, we'll just go ahead and delete this here. And if we save this, let's, oops, this one is a reserved term. How about that? So let's go back to our editor, and we'll call this, what should we, if we click this lock right here, it'll unlock it. And we'll, oops, try it again. We'll call it name property. That's important, again, for when you're rendering. And if you do want to enter a description, you can enter one here. And if we hit save, it finally lets us. Now, if we flip back to the content section, we now have the ability, actually we don't. We should have the ability to create that news landing page. So if we come back here to permissions, it's because of this right here. Yes, allow this at root, or no. So if we tick that box and hit save, come back here, let's do a quick refresh. Create, there's our news landing page. And notice that orange icon is now there, and we can call this something like news landing page. And there's our name. What's my name? We can call this whatever we want. My name is Henry. All right, so there's our news landing page. If I click away from it, you see that it's orange. If I right-click this, nothing can be created under there. So what's also very common is I come back here, and I create, and this is just for example, you can do this however you want. I'm going to create a year folder. So this is not going to manifest as an actual page. This is just an organizational unit. Let me pick folder. Sure, there we go. We'll pick that guy there. And we create it. So we created a year folder purely for organization. It has no properties with it. But we're going to go back to news landing, and we're going to go to permissions. We're going to allow a year folder to be created underneath. So if we come back, oops, you know what? Let me use the tab here. All right, now if we come back here and we hit create, there's our year folder, and we'll call this 2017. Now when I save and publish that, notice that let's see, the folder appears there, and if I try to create something under there, doesn't work. So we're going to do it one more time. We're going to create a day folder. So let me create a document type without a template, and we'll call this, I'll call it date instead of day. Day folder, let's give it a new icon. Maybe we want to use this one this time. And now this time we'll go to the year folder, go to the permissions, allow a child, and we'll call it date folder, save, come back here. I'm probably going way faster than you want me to, but oh well. And I just realized we don't want that called date folder, we want that called month folder. So one thing you can do quite safely is come back here to the date folder, name this month folder, hit save. Notice that my alias did not change, so we need to come back here, unlock this, call that month folder. Bam, there we go. So that should be all the things we should have to change. Let me refresh. And now notice how the tree is building here. And if we can create a month folder. You can call this 0 or 9, September, October, We'll call it 10 for right now. And as you notice here, it's building out our URL. So one thing that we haven't done here is created a home page. So right now we just kind of got a bunch of content without any sort of structure. It's just kind of root. So why not create a home page doc type? So let's go ahead and do that. So right click, create. We definitely want a template with this one. Home page. And for now, we don't have to put anything on there. And let's go with a home. It's very iconic. Hit save. Permissions, yes, allow this at root. Flip back here. We're going to create our home page. And I'll even call it the home page. Actually, I'll just call it home. All right. One thing we should do now is move the news landing and all these guys underneath home. So if I right click on news, it's landing, it's probably going to tell me, sorry, you can't do that. And it does. The reason being is because we need to go back to the home page and say, all right, what's allowed underneath me? Well, let's allow a news landing page. Let's allow a foo page. Let's allow a generic page. And hit save. Now our move operation shouldn't fail on us. And if I can find move, there we go. We'll move that there. Now let's examine the URLs. So if I go here, notice I have news landing page. If I go here, I've got news landing page /2017, and I've got news landing page /10. So one thing that's also very common is we're going to have news items underneath there. So let's go ahead and create a news item, and this is usually going to have a template with it. So let's see, let's call this one news item. And let's go with the newspaper icon again, and let's hit save. Now, one thing we need to do is make sure we go back to the month folder and allow, oops, not a composition, and allow our newly created news item. All right, so far so good. So if we go back to our content section, add a news item. Now this is where we'll have actual news. So for the moment, we'll just name it, that's way too long. We'll name it something more reasonable. There we go. And we hit save and publish. Bam, there we go. And now we can create a second news item right there in October. So let's add yet another name here. And I've got this cool little extension to help me out. And there you go. And as we get going, we're going to decide, you know what, there's now other months to which we should do this. November is going to come along. And we're going to save that. And now we can add more news items under this one. And I promise this will be the last news item for the moment. Okay, great. Of course, if you look at the news item, all it does is have generic properties here. And notice how it created a news item template. So to review real quick, when we were on templates earlier, we didn't have all these templates. So when we created a template, doc type, and we said, yes, go ahead and create a template, it puts the entries in there, and it associates the template to the doc type. So for instance, if we go to news item, and we click on templates here on the right, that's where you see the news item template. You can have multiple templates if you want. I recommend starting out with just a one-to-one relationship, but that's how that manifests. Okay, let's go back to the designer. Let's add a content tab. And this time, let's add a rich text editor. So a lot of times, I'll just call this text for now. We're going to add editor. Again, we're going to use the reuse option here. And we're going to get lost here. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're going to pick, we have a rich text editor already there. We're going to save. We're going to pop back out here. Let's look at a different piece of content. And there you go. We have our news item. It has some text here. We're really fast typers, and we're going to type in a bunch of fake text there. And if we hit save and publish, we're good. And so far, so good. So let's go ahead and clean up some of this. We're going to move, you know what? We're going to delete some of this stuff here because we don't need it here anymore. Now, what we will notice here, and this is a design thing, is we have page not found, server error. That sounds very useful. But if we were to click on this piece of content, go to its properties, we would see that it's a generic page. In general, I typically don't use a generic page for a server error or page not found. I create a doc type called error page. So let's get rid of these for right now. And we're going to go back here and we're going to do, like I said, we're going to create a doc type. We're going to call it error page doc type. And remember, this is, you can create as many as you want of these. Let's see if we pick error. There we go. We should go red. Hit save. We're going to have to allow this under our home page because that's where I want this to go. And oops, let's click on permissions. And we're going to now allow error pages to be created here underneath the home page. And let's go ahead and do this. So let's go with server error. And of course, how do you get the server error or the page not found to get rendered when those error conditions occur are outside of today's topic. But just know that when we create these error pages, it's creating a doc type with error, page not found. And of course, usually an error page or a page not found needs some sort of witty message that says, oh no, you've broken my website. And there you go. So, all right. Moving right along, we're now starting to see that we have a website beginning to be born here. So let's come back here. Typically, you only want the home page to be created here. A lot of times what I'll also do is I'll create a site settings node, and I've already done so let's just allow that and save. We're going to go ahead and use the ubiquitous settings logo here. And I'm going to create my site settings. Now you may be asking yourself, oops, site settings, maybe asking yourself, okay, it would probably not be good to have more than one of these pages. You only need one 500 page, one 404 page, one of these. So once you create your page, you should go back to your home page here and come back here and remove these from here. So just to give you an illustration, if we right click and create, right now the user, the editor, can create kind of multiples of pages we don't want them to keep creating. So what we want to do is we want to come back here and remove those from consideration, especially the news landing page, or also the news landing page, because we're going to use that. We only have one news landing page. So now that that's been saved and I hit create, looks like I need to make sure I reload. And if I right click, create, I now just have foo and generic page available to me. So just something to consider when you're working with your doc types. And if we look at some of the other doc types, we want to make sure that the permissions do not allow that the root content, or we don't want the root content checks. Notice how they came back here. So if I go to these pages again, or these doc types, I need to make sure I uncheck this box on each piece of document type, that is. Okay. All right, enough of that. So one cool feature of Umbraco is this. So over time, you may have a ton of news, a ton of events, a ton of whatever. So rather than have this really long tree that might require the user to scroll, we can say, hey, Umbraco, why don't you do a different view and take advantage of the real estate over here? So an easy example is if I take the month folder and I take the list view and I say, yes, enable list view, you can customize it. Of course, you don't know what it looks like yet. So let's hit save, and we're going to use the reload function here. Notice this little icon that showed up right here next to the folder. That indicates that we have a list view going on. Okay, and you can see here that there's now a list view of your content, and we're essentially moving the content from the tree over here, but it really does live there in the tree. And if we were to click on a piece of content here, you'll see that our content's there with the URL we expect. So if we come back here to the list view again here and we click on the cog here, you can see you've got a lot of different options here. So you can come in here and kind of play around with how they display. Okay, and now for one very important thing to do here. So in Umbraco, in the old days, you could take a document type and create one underneath it as an inheritance chain. So actually, let's pick one that we've already added something to. So we can create a doc type here, and we can do inherited news landing, if I can spell right, and we can hit save down here. So essentially what we'll get here is inherited items from the news content page, but I really can't do anything with it here. So when you go down the path of inheritance, be very careful, because now you have to take whatever's the parent or in the inheritance chain. And so What I would prefer, and just like in general programming, is compositions. So what is very common to do is create, say, an SEO composition, and this won't have a template. So we might do something like SEO, and we'll go ahead and add some fields here. And in fact, maybe we add a tab called SEO, and we might do something like meta keywords, add an editor here, and text string, piece of cake, nothing crazy here. We might then add a meta description, and then probably use a text area for this. Now you could probably use a RTE, but we don't want to have to clean out any HTML or anything like that. Okay, so now we have a doc type called SEO. Now, wouldn't it be great if each one of these already created doc types could just use this when it needs it, and if we don't want to use it, want to use something else, we can. So we want to avoid inheritance is essentially what I'm getting at. So if we go to the home page and we click on compositions, we're going to go ahead and tick SEO here. Now, of course, we can bring in other ones here. If we hit submit, you'll notice here that it says inheriting from SEO, but this is more of a composition as opposed to a direct inheritance. So if we want to change our mind, piece of cake, we uncheck that button. However, in the instance of the inherited news landing page, we basically have to delete that doc type. So now that we've included a composition on here and we come back here to the home page, we now have a tab called SEO. But of course, we want basically everybody to have the SEO tab, and what you'll have to do then is come back here to the news landing, because we're going to add that here. Oh, looks like we can't. Let's see here. Inherited tabs. Okay, I don't know. There's an inheritance problem there. Again, don't use inheritance. So let's go to the generic page here and click on SEO and hit save. And if we refresh here, let's create a generic page because I don't think we've actually done that. And we'll create a blank one. Let's do your generic about us. So, but what you can see here is you got SEO content properties, and that just showed up. Now, I guess while we're noticing here, maybe we want SEO to be a second tab, not the first tab. All right, we're going to go back here and we're going to go to reorder. And notice how we have the SEO tab is a different value here, and we can't change that here. So what we might want to do is go into the SEO itself, and when we hit reorder here, let's add maybe a 99 to this. If we save that, come back out here, and we hit refresh on our About Us page, hopefully it no longer appears as the first one, and as you see here, it doesn't. So you're always going to get the Properties tab. We're getting SEO through the composition here, and this is actually on the document type. And so in general, that is how document types work, and they're very fundamental in Umbraco, and getting a handle of how these work is very much a part of how Umbraco will work for you. Your experience with it will definitely change over time, and you'll definitely craft how you do these document types. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed today. I know it was long. Thanks for bearing with me, and we'll do this again. Thanks.